Ecologists make observations, ask questions, and collect data. The study of ecology begins with close observation of nature. Something catches an ecologist's eye and causes her to ask a question. Based on her observations, she then develops a best guess or hypothesis to answer this question. To test her hypothesis, the ecologist collects data using observations, experiments, models, or a combination of the three. She then analyzes and interprets the data, often using mathematics and statistics, to see if it supports or disproves her hypothesis. This usually leads to more questions, and the process starts again. To see this process in action, let's take a look at a real-life ecological study. In the early 1980s, ecologists began observing a sharp decline in populations of bird nesting in large tracts of forest. From previous studies, most ecologists believed the decline was connected to habitat fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation occurs when large, continuous blocks of habitat are broken up into smaller portions, when land is cleared to build roads, subdivisions, or crop fields. John Faborg and Rick Clausen, two ecologists in Missouri, noticed that large forests in the Ozarks were being fragmented when trees were cut for timber. These observations led them to ask the question, are forest birds affected by timber harvests? Faborg and Clausen hypothesized that if timber was harvested, forest bird populations would decrease. Like most hypotheses, their hypothesis contained an independent and dependent variable. An independent variable is changed and manipulated in some way. A dependent variable reacts to changes made to the independent variable. For Faborg and Clausen, their independent variable would be whether or not trees were cut. Their dependent variable would be how forest bird numbers changed in relation to the presence or absence of timber harvest. To test their hypothesis, the ecologists designed an experiment. They picked a large forest in the Ozarks to study. They cut trees in some areas of the forest. This formed the experimental group of their study. They left other areas of the forest uncut. These areas formed the controlled group of their study in Figure 1.2. Having both experimental and control groups allowed Faborg and Clausen to see how forest birds reacted when trees were cut and compare this to how birds reacted in areas of the forest that were unchanged. Because they could not collect data on every bird species that nests in the Ozarks, Faborg and Clausen focused on 5 forest birds and 6 birds that use bushy fields. Before the trees were cut, they collected data on the population, size, and nesting success of these 11 birds. After the experimental group was cut, they collected the same data again to see if there was a change. Using mathematics and statistics to analyze the data, Faborg and Clausen learned a number of things. As expected, there wasn't a change in the way birds use the uncut forest. However, they did find that timber harvest caused the number of all 5 forest birds to drop. They also found that timber harvest caused the number of bushy habitat birds to increase. This led the ecologists to ask new questions, which are still being researched. So in this figure you see, Faborg and Clausen set up their experimental by cutting trees in some areas of the forest, our experimental group, cutting the trees, and leaving other areas uncut, our control group. Areas where trees were cut formed the experimental group of the study. Uncut areas formed the control group. By comparing data collected from the control and experimental groups, Faborg and Clausen could see how birds were affected by timber harvests. Resource management. A forester hikes up a hillside covered with oak and hickories, pausing every so often to spray dots of orange paint on the trunks of selected trees. The painted trees will be cut down, hauled to a lumber mill, and used to make an array of products, such as boards and furniture. But harvesting different parts of the forest at different times, the forester maintains a patchwork of trees at different stages of growth. This provides habitat for a variety of wildlife and ensures that there are always younger trees to replace those that are cut. Insects hum as a wetland manager raises the gate on a water control structure, letting cool water splash into a field of smartweed and sedges. In a few days, the field will have a sheen of water over it, providing a much needed pit stop for an array of southbound waterfowl and spawning grounds for a variety of fish. After next spring's northward migration, the manager will drain water slowly off the pond, fostering a surge of lush plant growth. By mimicking the wetland's natural ebb and flow, the manager keeps the wetland ecosystem healthy. In the middle of a boat, in the middle of a lake, a generator rumbles in the still night air, zapping the surrounding water with electricity. The electricity temporarily stuns a fish that floats to the surface, where it is scooped up by a biologist with a long-handled net. She records a few measurements, then slips the fish unharmed back into the water. The biologist works through the night, netting and measuring hundreds of fish. The data she collects will help her adjust the lake's fishing regulations to ensure its bass, bluegill, and catfish populations remain healthy. These people have something in common. Each is a natural resource manager, a trained professional who works to protect, maintain, and restore healthy ecosystems. Foresters, wildlife managers, fishery biologists, and conservation agents are a few of the many different kinds of resource managers. All resource managers strive to balance the need of human society with the ability of ecosystems to produce and sustain healthy plant and animal populations. Resource managers work for federal or state agencies, nonprofit groups, and private companies. Many jobs in resource management require a bachelor's degree in forestry, fisheries, and wildlife, natural resources, ecology, or biology. People who work in resource management enjoy working outside, are curious about how nature works, and have a passion for keeping ecosystems healthy. Although ecology and resource management are related, they are not the same. Ecology is a pure science. Resource management is an applied science. In the same way that medical doctors know knowledge learned from anatomy and physiology to maintain and restore the health of their patients, resource managers apply principles learned from ecology to protect, maintain, and restore healthy ecosystems.